In a city where concrete buildings touched the sky, a courthouse stood as a symbol of justice and hope. Inside its grand halls, Judge Edward Hartley sat behind his wooden bench, his sharp eyes scanning the courtroom with decades of experience etched into his weathered face. Rebecca Williams stood at the defense table, her dark blue suit pressed perfectly, her hands resting confidently on her legal folder. She was young, perhaps in her early 30s, but her eyes told a story of determination that went far beyond her years. Today, she was representing Tom Carter, a factory worker who had been unfairly dismissed from his job after reporting unsafe working conditions. The courtroom felt heavy with tension. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Mr. Carter sat quietly, his hands clasped together, looking nervous but hopeful. His work uniform was clean but worn, telling a story of hard labor and simple dignity. Rebecca began her argument, her voice clear and steady. "Your Honor," she said, addressing Judge Hartley, "my client was terminated not for any performance issues, but because he dared to speak up about dangerous working conditions that could have harmed his fellow workers." Judge Hartley shifted in his seat. He had heard countless similar arguments in his years on the bench, and most seemed like typical workplace complaints. But something about Rebecca's presentation caught his attention. She presented documentation, safety reports, emails, witness statements. Each piece of evidence was carefully organized, telling a compelling story of corporate negligence. Mr. Carter had discovered that the factory was using outdated machinery that could potentially cause serious injuries. When he reported these issues to management instead of addressing the concerns, they simply fired him. Mr. Carter didn't just protect himself, Rebecca continued, her passion growing with each word. He tried to protect his colleagues, people with families, with children, who depend on their ability to work safely and return home each day. The judge watched her, his initial skepticism slowly giving way. Rebecca wasn't just presenting a legal argument, she was telling a human story. Her words painted a picture of workplace integrity, of standing up for what was right even when it was difficult. Mr. Carter's eyes began to fill with tears. He wasn't just a plaintiff in a legal case. He was a man who had risked everything to ensure the safety of others. His simple act of courage was now being heard in a court of law. Judge Hartley found himself leaning forward, listening intently. Rebecca's argument was different from the typical workplace discrimination cases he had heard. This wasn't about money or revenge. This was about human dignity, about protecting workers who often had no voice. As Rebecca concluded her opening statement, she looked directly at the judge. Her gaze was steady, respectful, but incredibly powerful. She wasn't begging or pleading, she was presenting truth, trusting in the justice system to recognize what was right. The courtroom remained silent. Even the court reporter seemed to hold her breath, understanding the weight of the moment. Mr. Carter looked at Rebecca with gratitude, knowing that someone was finally listening to his story. Judge Hartley cleared his throat. "Ms. Williams," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind, "you've presented some interesting documentation. We will hear the company's response, of course." Rebecca nodded, a slight smile crossing her face. She knew this was just the beginning. But she had already achieved something important. She had made the judge truly listen. As the first witnesses were called, the sunlight continued to stream through the windows, illuminating the courtroom with a sense of hope. One person's courage, supported by a dedicated lawyer, could indeed challenge an entire system. The case of Tom Carter was more than a legal dispute. It was a reminder that justice isn't just about laws, but about protecting human rights, about giving voice to those who might otherwise remain unheard. Judge Hartley made some notes, his pen moving steadily across the paper. Little did he know that this case, this moment, would be the beginning of a profound personal journey that would challenge everything he believed about justice, fairness, and human connection. The city's legal district hummed with quiet energy, files shuffling and coffee machines brewing in the background. Rebecca Williams sat in the law firm's break room, stirring her tea and thinking about the recent court case, Her colleague, Michael Hartley, walked in looking tired but curious. "That was quite a presentation yesterday," Michael said, pouring himself some coffee. His hands moved mechanically, revealing years of legal practice. Rebecca smiled. "Just doing my job," she replied simply. As they talked, the conversation drifted to family and background. Michael mentioned his complicated relationship with his father, a senior judge who seemed stuck in traditional ways of thinking. His words carried a weight of unresolved emotions. "My father and I haven't spoken in years," Michael shared, his voice dropping. "He never understood my perspective on social justice. Always believed in strict old-school legal interpretations." Rebecca listened carefully. She recognized the pain behind his words, a familiar story of generational misunderstandings. Michael's father was Judge Edward Hartley, the very same judge who had presided over Tom Carter's case. The connection was unexpected. Michael had been following the case closely, impressed by Rebecca's passionate arguments. He didn't know that his father had been the judge, nor that Rebecca had challenged his traditional judicial approach. Their conversation revealed layers of personal history. Michael had become a lawyer to challenge systemic inequalities, while his father represented an older, more conservative legal establishment. Their differences had created a deep, painful divide. "Sometimes," Rebecca said softly, "people can change. Perspectives can shift." Michael looked skeptical, but intrigued. The legal world was full of stories of transformation, but personal family dynamics were always more complicated. As they discussed the case, Michael realized something fascinating. Rebecca's approach in court, her blend of passion, evidence, and human storytelling, was exactly the kind of legal practice he believed in. She wasn't just presenting facts, she was humanizing the law. The break room, with its worn furniture and the smell of coffee, became a space of unexpected connection. Two lawyers from different backgrounds, united by a shared belief in justice, were discovering common ground. Michael pulled out some case files, showing Rebecca previous workplace discrimination cases he had studied. They discussed legal strategies, societal changes, and the role of law in creating meaningful social impact. "My father would never understand this approach," Michael said, a hint of sadness in his voice. "He believes law is about strict interpretation, not human understanding." Rebecca understood. Her own journey in law had been about bridging gaps, about seeing beyond legal text to human experiences. She had learned that true justice wasn't just about winning cases, but about creating understanding. Their conversation continued, weaving between professional analysis and personal reflection. They discovered shared values, a commitment to fairness, a belief in human dignity, a desire to use law as a tool for positive change. Outside, the city moved around them. Traffic sounds filtered through the window, a constant urban rhythm. Inside, the law firm, two lawyers were unknowingly part of a larger story. A story of potential reconciliation, of perspectives shifting, of hope. Michael's phone buzzed. A message from his firm about another challenging case. Rebecca checked her notes from the recent court hearing. Their professional lives continued, but something had changed in their understanding of each other. As the afternoon light filtered through the office windows, casting soft shadows, Rebecca and Michael represented something powerful. The potential for dialogue, for understanding, for breaking down barriers that seemed impossible to cross. They didn't know it yet, but their conversation was the beginning of a journey that would touch not just their lives but the life of Judge Edward Hartley. A journey of unexpected connections, of healing old wounds, of discovering that compassion could be a stronger force than years of misunderstanding. The break room, with its ordinary setting, had become a place of extraordinary potential, a small space where personal stories could intersect, where healing could begin, where hope could take root. In the quiet chambers of his personal study, Judge Edward Hartley sat surrounded by law books and memories. Photographs lined the wooden shelves, images of a younger version of himself, of a family once whole, now fractured by misunderstanding and pride. The recent court case with Rebecca Williams had stirred something deep within him. Her passionate, Arguments about Tom Carter's workplace struggle continued to echo in his mind. He found himself questioning decades of rigid judicial thinking, a process both uncomfortable and strangely liberating. On his desk, a faded photograph of Michael as a young law student caught his attention. They had been close once, before differences, in perspective, had created an insurmountable wall between them. Michael's progressive views had challenged everything Judge Hartley believed about law and society. That evening he pulled out an old journal. His hand, steady from years of writing legal decisions, trembled slightly as he opened the worn pages. Memories flooded back, arguments with Michael, heated discussions about social justice, moments where understanding had given way to stubborn silence. Rebecca's recent court presentation had been more than just a legal argument. It was a mirror reflecting the very conversations he had once refused to have with his son. She spoke with a combination of professional precision and deep human compassion, qualities he had long dismissed as unnecessary in legal proceedings. In the soft lamplight, Judge Hartley began to write. Not legal notes or court decisions, but personal reflections. He wrote about his fears, his traditional beliefs, the walls he had built around his heart. Each word was a step towards understanding, a quiet rebellion against his own long-held prejudices. A framed law degree caught his eye, Michael's graduation photo. He remembered the pride he had felt, followed by the deep pain of their growing distance. Michael had chosen a path of social justice, challenging systemic inequalities, while his father had represented a more conservative legal establishment. The city outside his window grew dark. Streetlights flickered, casting long shadows across his study. Inside, a personal transformation was quietly taking place. Judge Hartley was learning that law was more than just rules and regulations. It was about human experience, about understanding, about compassion. He thought about Tom Carter, the factory worker Rebecca had represented, a simple man who had risked everything to protect his colleagues. Such courage was something his younger self would have overlooked, but now it touched something deep within him. Old legal notebooks lay scattered, filled with years of traditional interpretations. But tonight, something was changing. Each page seemed to whisper a new possibility, that justice was not about rigid interpretation but about human understanding. A cup of tea grew cold beside him, untouched. His mind was elsewhere, traveling through memories, confronting personal demons that had lived within him for decades. The silence of the room was filled with unspoken conversations, with the potential for healing. Judge Hartley remembered Michael's passionate arguments about workplace rights, about protecting the vulnerable. Arguments he had once dismissed were now finding resonance in his heart. Rebecca's recent court presentation had opened a door he thought had been permanently closed. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall. Its soft rhythm seemed to match the internal journey happening within the judge's study. Each droplet represented a possibility of understanding, of reconnection, of breaking down walls built by misunderstanding. He pulled out a blank piece of paper. For the first time in years, he considered writing to Michael. Not a formal letter, but a genuine attempt to bridge the distance between them. Words of understanding, of acknowledgement, of potential reconciliation. The night deepened. The city continued its quiet dance of lights and shadows. And in one small study, a man was confronting his personal demons, learning that true strength was not about maintaining rigid positions, but about the courage to change, to understand, to reconnect. Judge Edward Hartley was discovering that the most important judgments were not made in a courtroom, but in the quiet moments of personal reflection, in the willingness to see beyond one's own limited perspective. The courthouse buzzed with anticipation. A landmark case about workplace discrimination was about to be heard, and everyone knew something different was happening. Judge Edward Hartley sat on the bench looking different, more thoughtful, more human. Rebecca Williams stood ready, her documents carefully arranged. She had become more than just a lawyer. She was now a catalyst for change. The case involved a cleaning company that had systematically discriminated against older workers, forcing them out of their jobs through subtle but consistent pressure. The hearing began. Something remarkable happened. Judge Hartley's questions were no longer sharp and dismissive. Instead, they showed genuine curiosity. He asked about the workers' experiences, their families, their struggles. His approach was transforming before everyone's eyes. The company's lawyer looked confused. This wasn't the same judge they had appeared before in previous cases. Judge Hartley was listening, truly listening, to the human stories behind the legal documents. One witness, an older cleaning worker named John Peterson, shared his story. He had worked for the company for 27 years, only to be slowly pushed out when younger workers were hired. His voice trembled with emotion, telling a story of dignity and survival. Judge Hartley leaned forward, his eyes filled with unexpected compassion. He saw more than just a witness. He saw a human being with a lifetime of experience with dignity that deserved protection. Rebecca's presentation was masterful. She wove together legal arguments with human stories, showing how workplace discrimination wasn't just a legal issue but a deeply human problem. Each word was carefully chosen, each piece of evidence meticulously prepared. During a court recess, Michael Hartley, who had been observing the case, caught Rebecca's eye. Something was changing. His father, once a symbol of rigid judicial thinking, was transforming before their very eyes. The courtroom felt different. The usual formal atmosphere had been replaced by something more human, more connected. People whispered, sensing that something extraordinary was happening. When Judge Hartley delivered his ruling, the courtroom fell silent. He not only ruled in favor of the workers but delivered a powerful statement about workplace dignity. His words went beyond the legal text, speaking to fundamental human rights and respect. Workplace discrimination, he said, his voice clear and strong, is not just a legal violation, it's a violation of human dignity. Michael watched, tears forming in his eyes. This was the father he had lost years ago, a man capable of true understanding, of seeing beyond rigid rules to human experience. Rebecca felt a sense of victory that went beyond winning a case. She had helped create a moment of transformation, a bridge between old and new ways of thinking about justice. The workers who had brought the case stood together, their hands clasped. They had come seeking justice and found something more, recognition of their worth, their dignity, their right to be treated with respect. As the courthouse emptied, conversations continued. Lawyers, workers, court staff, everyone felt they had witnessed something special. It wasn't just a legal ruling. It was a moment of human connection. Outside, the city continued its daily rhythm. But inside the courthouse, a quiet revolution had happened. One judge had shown that personal growth was possible, that understanding could replace judgment, that compassion could be a powerful form of justice. Michael approached his father after the hearing. Their eyes met, years of distance suddenly, feeling less permanent. Rebecca watched from a distance, understanding that some healing happens in unexpected moments. The path to understanding is never straight. It winds, it turns, it requires courage and vulnerability. But on this day, in this courthouse, that path had become a little clearer, a little more hopeful. Judge Edward Hartley had done more than make a legal ruling. He had opened a door to compassion, to understanding, to seeing the humanity in every person who came before him. And in that moment, justice was more than a legal concept. It was a living, breathing expression of human connection. The autumn sun cast warm golden light across the city park. Michael and his father, Judge Edward Hartley, sat together on a wooden bench, a distance that had once seemed impossible now bridged by understanding. Rebecca Williams watched from a distance, her heart full of quiet satisfaction. She knew this moment was more than a personal reconciliation. It was a testament to the power of human connection, of listening, of truly seeing one another. "I was wrong," Edward said softly, his weathered hands clasped together. "About so many things. About the law, about people, about you." Michael listened, years of pain and misunderstanding slowly melting away. Their conversation wasn't just about their personal history, but about a broader understanding of justice, of human dignity. The park around them seemed to breathe with possibility. Children played nearby, their laughter a soundtrack to this moment of healing. Leaves drifted slowly, symbolizing change, transformation, the gentle process of letting go. Edward shared stories about his recent court cases, how Rebecca's approach had changed his perspective. Michael listened, seeing his father not as a rigid judge but as a human being capable of growth and understanding. I realized, Edward continued, that law isn't just about rules. It's about people, their stories, their struggles, their hopes. Michael remembered the years of silence, the arguments, the painful distance. Now those memories felt like something from another lifetime. Healing had arrived quietly, without drama, through simple human connection. Rebecca approached them, giving a gentle smile. She had unknowingly been the bridge between father and son, her passionate legal work creating a pathway to understanding. Sometimes, she said, change happens in the most unexpected ways. The city moved around them, cars passing, people walking, life continuing its constant rhythm. But in this small moment, something profound was happening. A family was reconnecting, understanding was growing, hope was being reborn. Edward talked about the landmark ruling he had made in the workplace discrimination case. Michael listened, seeing his father's transformation not as weakness, but as incredible strength. The ability to change, to grow, to admit one's mistakes, these were true signs of character. Their conversation wandered through memories, through legal discussions, through personal reflections. The park seemed to hold their story, a story of redemption, of hope, of human connection transcending differences. Nearby, an elderly couple walked slowly, hand in hand. Their love seemed to echo the reconciliation happening on the bench, a reminder that connection could survive time, misunderstanding, a distance. Rebecca thought about Tom Carter, the factory worker whose case had started this journey. One person's courage, one lawyer's passion, one judge's willingness to listen. These had created a ripple of change far beyond a single courtroom. As the afternoon light softened, Michael and his father continued talking. They weren't just rebuilding a relationship. They were creating a new understanding about law, about justice, about family, about human potential for growth. The city continued its endless movement, but in this park, in this moment, something magical was happening. Walls were coming down. Understanding was being built. Hope was taking root. Edward looked at his son, seeing him not just as a lawyer, but as a human being. Michael looked at his father, seeing not just a judge, but a person capable of profound transformation. Rebecca watched, understanding that this moment was bigger than one family. It was a symbol of what was possible when people truly listened to each other, when they approached differences with compassion, when they believed in the possibility of change. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in warm oranges and soft pinks, the three of them sat together, not as lawyers or judges or mediators, but simply as humans, connected, understanding, hopeful. The park around them seemed to whisper a simple truth. Redemption is always possible. Hope is always waiting. And human connection can heal even the deepest of wounds.